Good morning. This is Ron. It is Monday, July the 23rd. Welcome to Story Time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And yes, this is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I'm the only one that makes this presumption for the status quo. Speaking to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. So we've got a little bit of Tammy Bruce coming up, and some house, and maybe a couple of jokes. But in the meantime, I was thinking about the foundation of rights and what it is that makes a right. And the reason is I need to find the foundation is so that you can tell the difference between what is a right and what is not a right. And so if we can get to the essences, because as Ayn Rand has discovered, that the left likes to play a game where they define words not by their essences but by their accidents. And that is a bad definition, and an incorrect definition, and it leads the conversation astray. So, what is the essence of a right? And it occurred to me that a right is something that can only be taken away from a person by the use of force, by the use of brute force. For instance, the ones that are listed in the Constitution, for one, is freedom of speech. God gave us all the right to speak, to communicate, and the only way that that can be taken away is with the use of brute force. And really, the only ones that can actually do that, make sure that you're not communicating, would be a power. A power strong enough would be a governmental power. So, whatever rights and Ayn Rand had recognized that all rights are property based, but in essence, it's still a matter of, and I guess that would be go with property as well, is that we own property because we can, and the only way to stop people from owning property is to use brute force to make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen. So, the essence again of rights is having is something that can't be taken away from me except by the use of brute force. If I say, for instance, that somebody calls me on the phone and I hang up on them, I haven't denied or abridged their freedom of speech. They're still able to speak. They're just not going to be able to do so on my show at that particular moment. They can always call back. So no brute force has been used to silence these folks. Now, if I go and I find somebody that says something I don't like, I tie them up and tape their mouth shut. Now we can say that getting into violating their rights. So, when I come back, like I said, it's going to be a little clip or segment from one of my favorite former leftists, Tammy Bruce. All right, thank you very much. And Tammy Bruce is one of my favorite former leftists because she has keen insight into what makes the left, to their methods and whatnot. You hear Rush Limbaugh always saying that he knows the left like every square inch of his glorious naked body, but he doesn't. He didn't. His family wasn't communist or socialist. He didn't grow up in that kind of a household. He isn't a former lefty. He doesn't know them. And by listening to this guy, you can tell he doesn't know them. His analysis is extremely shallow. So we were with this book that she has called The Death of Right and Wrong, and we were going into examples of where right and wrong had died, and one of them was with a guy named Abu Jamal, or is it Mumia Abu Jamal, I believe is his name. And he was convicted of murdering a police officer and was sentenced to death. And the surrounding hubbub about that, the celebrities that get involved and saying he shouldn't be killed, et cetera, and how that kind of thinking came about, and how it is that the left thinks in order to try to create these kinds of protests and whatnot. And so here we are at the next segment called The Legacy of the Left. Let me see if I've got a little quote here. Um, well, the last part of it. The keep in mind the leftism I'm describing has nothing to do with the classic liberalism on which our country was founded. The political philosophy based on individual freedom, in fact, is quite the opposite. The left has had to restrict individual freedom of thought and deed in order to destroy the concept of judgment and undermine notions of right and wrong that have been held nearly universally for millennia. This is the result of the wrong people getting control of our culture at a time when we were vulnerable. It's that simple and that scary. It also can be reversed without having to diminish the benefits of liberty that flow naturally from our system and our hearts. And now, the legacy of the left. I'm an odd bird on today's left. I actually believe that we can embrace individual liberty while also applying some standard of dignity to the way we live our lives. As a gay woman, I live a life made possible by the tolerance of the average American. The efforts of activists in the 1960s to bring about an environment that would be safer for homosexual adults and freer for all those who are minorities in our society have been generally recognized as a good thing. Now, on the contrary, see the left demonizing the very idea of decency and their determination to lobotomize Americans into foggy silence about anything cultural. In truth, being gay and living with decency and dignity are not exclusive concepts. But the left has dirtied those words to such a degree that when I've used them in conversation, they have elicited the same reaction as if I had suddenly uttered the word nigger. Friends have urged me not even to use the word morality because it is too loaded. All the more reason to dust it off. The left has to restrict individual freedom of thought and deed in order to destroy the concept of judgment and undermine the notions of right and wrong. And that's a quote from her previous section. You don't, after all, need to be steeped in religious fundamentalism to realize that things have gone terribly wrong. I personally refuse to be silent when a movement I've worked for, believing it was meant to expand tolerance and increase liberty, devolves into an effort to eliminate all value-based concepts. For example, as a gay woman, I expect tolerance, but I understand that tolerance is not acceptance or buy-in. I don't expect other women to run out and become lesbians just because they tolerate me, or even if they like me or admire the stands I have taken. A fundamentalist Christian may think my lifestyle is wrong, but it's not fundamentalist Christians that have attacked and demonized me over the last 7 years. A good example of the difference between today's right and today's left can be seen in their reaction to murder. People on the right, no matter how strongly opposed to abortion they are, nearly all recognize that anti-abortion activists who kill doctors are wrong. Contrast that with the left's lionization of black men who kill whites, and especially white police officers. The noble effort in the 1960s to encourage individuality apparently had no braking mechanism. It continued to a point where self-gratification became the goal at the expense of values that could coexist with and even enhance our newfound sense of our individuality and sexual self-awareness. Faith, family, fidelity, truth, and honor all became casualties of America's cultural elite. Tolerance, once a genuine American ideal, has become a code word for moral relativism and all its side effects. Once it was realized that the American people were willing to accept diversity and even some challenge to the status quo, the left's goal changed from extending the boundaries of what was considered right to having no boundaries at all. Moral relativism became the order of the day, a view that moral standards are entirely grounded in social custom, varying from culture to culture, moment to moment, circumstance to circumstance. It is this attitude that allows a jury to set Montoon Hart free because, after all, who are we to judge? Excellent piece. The only quibble that I've got with it is that she fails to recognize the overall goal of the left is worldwide revolution and worldwide socialist paradise. That's what they're working for, and that's the reason they do everything that they do. A lot of things that seem contradictory or self-destructive, and they're designed to get a reaction. They're designed to provoke people into action by trying to destroy values That's exactly what they're hoping to do. Get a backlash, and let's get the riots started, and maybe a civil war, and et cetera, et cetera. And hopefully, it will escalate into a full worldwide revolution. So, when we come back, it's going to be House and Philosophy. Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome back. And so we're going to be, I'm going to be reading from House, the philosophy according to House. And House was, of course, a television show about a doctor in on the East Coast, and who was uh, taking painkillers for a problem with his leg. He walked with a limp and whatnot, but he was a brilliant doctor with a lot of oh, I don't know, interesting, with a rather interesting attitude, let's put it that way. Living the life of reason is, finally, of ultimate importance according to Aristotle because it leads to happiness or well being, what the Greeks termed eudaimonia. So even if House usually seems to care about more about solving the puzzles than the results that ensue, solving the puzzles must contribute to some sense of internal well being for him. If I am right that he's living the examined life, the life of reason. Some people would no doubt disagree with this conclusion. House, after all, they might say, seems to be miserable. Paraphrasing the sexy nutritionist from season three's Resignation, I say to them, how miserable can he be saving lives, sleeping around, and doing drugs? Pass Aristotle of Icodon. And a quick quibble here with this is that he says, what is it? Let's see, it must um, contribute to some sense of internal well being for him. That's not what the happiness is all about and what Aristotle was doing. It was not about finding out what's uh, what's good for you or me as individuals, but human beings in general. So, um, so it's not. It wasn't relativism that Aristotle was out after. He was out. He was after objectivity. Find out what is important to everybody, to every human being. And it ultimately comes down to the pursuit of happiness. Everybody is trying to be happy, not only in terms of their psychology, and also he refers, the author kind of hints at that too, the saying, well, it must contribute to some sense of well being. Well, but that's not all. There's a moral quality to what Aristotle was talking about when he talks about happiness, being a moral and upright person. Chapter 2, House and Sartre, Hell is Other People, by Jennifer L. McMahon. When it first aired in the fall of 2004, the Fox series House seemed an unlikely hit, focusing its attention on the brilliant but deeply unlikable Dr. Gregory House. It left little room for the audience to see the show's protagonist as anything but a jerk. Several years and several Golden Globes later, House is a huge success. What is the source of House's appeal? As a medical drama, it draws upon our deep-seated cultural interest in medicine, centered on the investigation of mysterious maladies with a protagonist modeled on the legendary Sherlock Holmes. It also satisfies our long-standing fascination with detective stories, but House is more than another ER, more than another CSI. Its singularity lies primarily in its surprising protagonist, a man who simultaneously inspires interest and loathing. House is like a car wreck. You can't help but look. While thankfully most of us don't come upon car wrecks every day, House illustrates something we do encounter daily: irritating people. Sartre's Theory of Others, A Case of History. House has an important predecessor in its focus on the negativity of social relations. The existential philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, 1905 to 1980, is well known for his cynical account of interpersonal relationships as manifested in both his philosophy and his literary works. Known for his analysis of the oppressive nature of the look and the declaration, hell is other people, Sartre highlights the anxiety that our relationships with others elicit and the way those relationships can inhibit personal autonomy. While Sartre regards interpersonal relationships as tremendous sources of conflict and concern, he is also emphatic that these relationships are essential to our being. Sartre's theory of others is conveyed in his principal philosophic work, Being and Nothingness, and in his play, No Exit. Sartre's account of his social relationships contrasts with that of his contemporary and fellow existentialist Martin Heidegger. While both Sartre and Heidegger regard humans as fundamentally social beings, Heidegger emphasizes the sense of connection people experience. In contrast, Sartre emphasizes how others frequently irritate and impede us, and he asserts that the relations that exist between individuals are fundamentally ones of conflict. He attributes the ambivalence we experience towards others to three main causes. And so we will go ahead and get into that next time. And Sartre, by the way, one of the things I want to make a point of is letting everybody know that there are people that are referred to as philosophers that are not. They're no such thing. They are psychologists or psychologistics, might be a better way to put it. And that's what is highlighted here. Sartre highlights the anxiety that our relationships with others can elicit in the ways those relationships can inhibit personal autonomy. That is not a statement of philosophy. That is a statement of psychology. And like I said, a lot of people that are called philosophers that are really more psychologists. The same thing with Nietzsche and Hegel and a lot of others. Kant is probably also more psychologistic than philosophic. And so the difference is that with psychology, you can use the tools and techniques of psychology or the psychologistic in order to manipulate, bully, and intimidate other people. You can use the more techniques. Philosophy is more of a journey of discovery, looking around you and figuring out what is it that I see, what is the importance and relevance of what I see and experience every day, and also applying it in the broadest sense or broadest terms. So when we come back, a few jokes from the New York City Cab Driver's Joke Book. Thank you very much. And the New York City Cab Driver's Joke Book is a joke book written by Jim Peach. It's actually compiled a bunch of jokes that he knew and that he heard as a cab driver. So, a man is playing golf at a very exclusive country club for the first time, and on the eighth hole, he hits a hole-in-one. So he walks down to the green, and as he takes the ball from the cup, a genie pops out. "This is a very exclusive golf course," says the genie, "and has everything, including the services of a genie, if you make a hole-in-one on the eighth hole. I will be happy to grant you any wish you desire." So the man says, "Great, I want to have a longer penis." The genie says, "Your wish is granted," and disappears down the hole. So the golfer heads back to join up with his friends. As he is walking, he can feel his penis slowly growing. As the golf game progresses, his penis keeps getting longer and longer until it comes out beneath his shorts and goes down below his knees. Thinks to himself, maybe this wasn't such a great idea after all. So he leaves his friends and goes back to the eighth hole with a bucket of balls and begins to shoot. Finally, he shoots a hole-in-one. And this time he gets down to the green. And by the time he gets down to the green, he has to hold his penis to keep it from dragging on the ground. As he takes the ball from the cup, out pops the genie. "This is a very exclusive golf course," says the genie once again, "and has everything, including the services of a genie, if you make a hole-in-one on the eighth hole. I'll be happy to grant you any wish you desire." "Yeah," says the man. "Could you make my legs longer?" And on that note, we conclude another episode of Story Time. And until next time, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.